Hello there. My name is Tom Ballard. I'm an ambassador for Refugee Legal, and I am joined on this little call here with the executive director of Refugee Legal, David Manne. Hi, David.
Hi, Tom.
Great to chat to you, and great to join you to have some good news in the space of refugee rights in Australia. This is very rare, but it's very good news. And people might have heard in the headlines recently, we had an announcement from the Albanese Labor government in regards to temporary protection visas and some good news for people seeking asylum and seeking permanent residency in this country. News that we can welcome. We want to talk about exactly what this announcement is, what it means for people seeking asylum, and the kind of people that Refugee Legal works with, and what we want next. We want more good news. So why don't we kick off, David, and just lay out exactly what was announced last week by the Labor government in regards to temporary detention visas and the future of people seeking asylum in this country?
Yeah, well, look, this week, at the beginning of the week, we woke to really momentous news. I think it's transformative that the government have essentially announced that 19,000 people who have been stuck in limbo for years on temporary protection visas, or SHEVs, but the same thing, basically on temporary protection, will be able to convert those temporary visas to permanent visas. The visa that they've used is, or are using, is what's called a resolution of status visa, or a ROS visa, if anyone hears that. But basically, that's the essence of it. People that have been stuck in this terrible limbo, this cruel limbo, for over a decade, on temporary protection, where all they can ever do for the rest of their lives, the best they can do is reapply every 3 or 5 years for another temporary protection visa. This change means that they can convert that temporary protection visa into a permanent visa.
Mm. Yeah, and obviously, as the name suggests, that temporary limbo is pretty brutal. If you want to build a life and become a member of the community, access to certain rights when it comes to welfare and work rights. Also, I didn't realize this, but like I was reading about some people on TPVs couldn't go to uni because, of course, if you go to uni on a TPV, then you have to pay international student fees. And obviously, if you've been fleeing persecution, you might not have the extraordinary amount of money it takes to study at an Australian university. So
Yeah,
it's
Tom,
it's
the cruel limbo of temporary protection had all sorts of prohibitions which were crushing, that
yeah.
caused deep anguish and suffering to people. Um, I think the greatest suffering of all was the absolutely total prohibition on family reunion,
Right.
on temporary protection. That meaning loved ones stuck overseas in precarious situations often they simply could not reunite with them. There was a total prohibition that lifts. As soon as someone gets permanent residence, they have the right to sponsor family. But there's all sorts of other rights that flow from that, including a pathway to citizenship downstream. But all of these sort of bars on that ordinarily would apply if you're in the community, living in the community in
Mm.
Australia, will be lifted, and people will be able to rebuild their lives, with a true sense of security, of belonging, of certainty, and also, I think most importantly, that access to family reunion, to be able to reunite with loved ones. So it is absolutely transformative.
Yeah. So it's fantastic news for about 19,000 people who are in this position who are now going to be on this path. What kind of reaction have you been getting from these people? These are the people that Refugee Legal work with and support. What kind of feedback you've been getting about this big announcement?
Tom, it's been both deep relief, but also people are just so happy. I mean, it's one of these things where after this terrible situation that's dragged on and on, that people have been calling us, and a lot. Our phones have been absolutely, we've been inundated with calls, but they're calls of relief and really happy. And I've had some calls too, like other members of the team, from people that we've been helping for well over a decade through this ordeal. I know there's a text message I got actually on Sunday night as the story broke, from a man that I've helped along the way for well over a decade, who basically, and he's happy for me to, without mentioning his name, just to say what he said, but it's just a text message as the news broke. Wow, this is amazing. When can I get my family here? And I think lots of messages like that, and I think it's both that relief, it's a real sense of excitement, but also very practical.
Mm.
How long will it take to get the visa? What do I need to do? And then very much focused, many people very much focused on that family reunion question. what do I then do? How long will it take?
It's good news. I'm sure a lot of people involved in this sector have been smiling a lot over the past couple of days. Now, let's be a little bit negatory, Amos, here, or let's just talk about the full reality here. People might
Yep.
have read stories about the 12,000 people who aren't necessarily touched by this and might be still looking at some kind of legal limbo or aren't affected by this announcement, who still need our help and support. Can you give us a little bit of idea about what this announcement doesn't do for everyone who's seeking asylum or in this kind of visa status and those 12,000 people who were left out?
Yeah, maybe a quick recap, Tom, that for over a decade, broadly speaking, there have been over 30,000 people who came by boat, sought asylum, sought protection, and around 2/3 were approved through the process. And that's over 19,000 people who are now able to apply to convert their visas to permanency. That's the group we're talking about, but there's many others. There's around 1/3 of that group who were refused, and who essentially were refused through this fundamentally unfair process that was implemented by the previous government called the fast track system. And it basically removed the right to a proper hearing, and refused that there were many people refused for that through that process, including people from Afghanistan, from Myanmar, a whole range of countries where they're refugee produced, they're countries where there are real dangers. So there are many people in this country. There's around 1/3. There are around 9,000, I think, overall, who were refused and who are still in this situation of limbo. Many are in the courts appealing their case. Extremely slow process through the courts, years and years of litigation in the courts, and an uncertain outcome. There are also, Tom, there are around 2,500 people that are at the end of the line, so-called, like they don't have a case on foot at the moment of appeal. They don't have any appeal on foot, and they're refused. And that does include people, including Afghans, people from Myanmar, etc. So the question then is, well, what is the government going to do here? What's the situation? And the government have announced as part of the reform at the beginning of the week that for the people in that situation, that they'll have to look at some kind of voluntary return. They don't have anything on foot. It'd be absolutely critical that we ensure that everyone who was refused has the ability to have their case re-looked at. That's our view, and we've been pressing for this very strongly, and we will continue to.
And I think further to that, so obviously those people left out absolutely need our advocacy and solidarity and support. It's important to note that this policy does not actually abolish TPVs completely. It does seem to basically end the TPV status for everyone who's currently on one at the moment and gives them a pass to residency, at least in that 19,000 people, which is fantastic. But under law, TPVs will still exist moving forward, unfortunately. And also, just last week, the Labor government reaffirmed its support for offshore detention, and the legal status of and funding for offshore detention centres was reaffirmed by this current government, this current parliament, which, as we all know, Refugee Legal does not like. There's an absolute breach of people's human rights. It's a terrible, cruel system that we absolutely need to end as a country, and Refugee Legal does fantastic work on that front. I suppose finally we should again sum up on the happy note that this announcement has been made. Full credit to the Labor government for getting this through, honouring the election commitment that they made. But we have to recognise the extraordinary work of advocacy groups such as Refugee Legal, the Asylum Seeker Resource Centre, the Refugee Council, refugee people and people seeking asylum themselves, who speak to the media, who speak up bravely about their lives, about their desires to live safely in this country. I mean, this is a pretty fantastic win for the refugee rights movement as a whole, right, David?
Tom, it is. I have to say, from Refugee Legal's point of view, we've been there since the beginning at the front line, really, in relation to helping people through this terrible temporary protection visa policy. I mean, goes back to the late 90s, that the policy and has been in place for the large part of over 2 decades. And we've been at the front line of making sure that everyone possible can get the legal help they need to apply under the process, but also to advocate for change. And, recently we were at the table, I would say fairly regularly with government, both the ministerial and the departmental level, together with others, to press for these changes, but also to ensure that the shape of them, do everything we can to make sure that the shape of these changes is the best possible reform. Look, at the end of the day, a real focus for us, of course, as always, is going to be that frontline legal assistance scaling up as we have, to do everything we can to make sure that people get the information they need, they get the legal help they need to make sure they can convert their visas to permanency. But also, there's going to be a huge amount of work ongoing in the next few years to then help people with family reunion, to apply for family reunion. There's lots that people need legal help in all of these areas. It's absolutely essential. And also to make sure that those who have been refused are able to put their case to the government for reassessment. And there's a lot of heavy lifting to be done in that area too. So they're real focuses for us. And we are scaling up as always to make sure that we can be at the front line helping people as they need it. The phones are running hot. We've got a special hotline, Tom. We've on our website, we've got an information sheet, a one-pager, translations to come, and also frequently asked questions, information for people. And but that's really what we're doing. And I have to say the team here are getting calls, not the usual calls, I have to say, inundated with the hotline with people who are actually, as I said, sort of both relieved and happy, and looking to the future. How can I get that visa, and then how can I get my family here, which is just fantastic. It is.
People calling up. I'm excited about the Australian immigration system. It's a very rare change, a nice change. It's fantastic.
That's right, Tom. The other thing is, I just wanted to add too that this reform, as momentous as it is, I think has a deeper meaning, and that is that I think it does open up a real path to much bigger reform. I mean, this area is a policy, is one that needs fundamental reform in so many different areas. I mean, you referred to people who are not still stuck in offshore detention, in that cruel, inhumane situation offshore, being really destroyed by that continues, and that policy. There's still many people stuck in indefinite detention in this country, stuck, without charge, without trial, in indefinite detention, people who came here seeking protection. There are so many issues that require fundamental reform. And I do think that this kind of reform, this TPV reform, is very important in that context too, because at its heart, it is in practical terms, charting a course of a more humane path. But I do think it also has the ability to chart a course for more humane reform in other areas. And I think we need to build on that momentum.
Well, if you want to be part of that, maybe you already do support Refugee Legal. If so, thank you so much. If you want to think about doing that, or maybe chip in a little bit more, what have you, you can go to refugeelegal.org.au. All the donate details are there. David, thanks for chatting to me. Congratulations, and I'll chat to you again soon.
Thanks a lot, Tom.